Welcome to all the alumni who've joined us today, and we are very glad you're here. I invite you to go to the chat feature and put in your name, maybe what years you were at AMBS and where you live now, and make sure you send that to everyone, not to the hosts and panelists. That way we can all see who is here in the group with us. If you have any questions as we go along, I invite you to use the Q&A feature. I'll be watching that and I'll choose the questions out of that to send along to our guest today. And if you have any technical concerns, you can just send those to the AMBS host. And please note that the webinar is being recorded. You know me now, Janeen Bertsche Johnson, and one of my roles at AMBS is as Alumni Director. And this is our last third Thursday session for this academic year. We will start up again in September, so we'll have the next couple months off. Today, our guest is Bob Yoder. He joined the advancement team in January 2018. He just was recognized a couple days ago as a fifth-year employee of AMBS. Now he is serving as the Director of Development. Bob graduated from Eastern Mennonite University, received his MDiv from AMBS in 2001, and his Doctor of Ministry degree from Western Theological Seminary in 2007. He also has a certificate in fundraising management from Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis's Lilly School of Philanthropy. Previously, Bob has served as a pastor, as conference minister of youth and young adults for Indiana, Michigan Mennonite Conference and Central District Conference, and as campus pastor and assistant professor of youth ministry at Goshen College. He has authored 3 books and numerous articles. Bob's going to start by answering several questions that I have for him, and then after that, we'll open it up for your questions and comments. And remember, you can submit those at any time during the webinar through the Q&A feature. Thanks for joining us today, Bob. I know you've sat in on several of these before. Now it's your turn to get to answer all these wonderful questions and let people get a glimpse into your life. But I'd like you to start by just telling us about yourself, what you'd like us to know as an introduction to you.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, I would say is that I'm very grateful for all the ministry opportunities that I've had over the last couple of decades. And I'll just say it probably started as a teenager, a young teenager. My parents were part of a church plant in southwestern Pennsylvania, Somerset County, where I was born and raised. And that had a pivotal moment in my life because we all pitched in to work at this church and to connect with people who are a bit different than us, me and just growing up. That's where I probably start to first feel my call to ministry at that time. I remember talking to my mom one day, I think I was 14 years old, and I said something to the effect of, well, I might want to be a pastor someday. Pastor Ken's not going to be around forever. That was kind of the start of thinking, and I've gone back to that moment, that conversation with my mother quite a bit. It also helped me start my own identity as more of an evangelist, or that passion for evangelism. Later, I pastored a small congregation in southwestern Pennsylvania or in Somerset County, that was a church plant. I was not the church planter, but I was the first pastor. And so that further drove that part of that identity for me. Then coming to AMBS as a student in 1998, I even lived that out even more in following that. I first started here as a student, focused on the evangelism and mission courses with Art McPhee, and that was good. But then it was more in the Bible classes is where I unpacked more about what biblical evangelism is, and that kind of drove me. So that's a bit of part of my identity. The other part of my identity is that I'm a pastor's spouse. So I'm married to a congregational pastor, Pamela, who's been pastoring for 21 years. We met in Gail Gerber-Kuntz's class. I jokingly tell people that when I first saw Pamela, I thought she was a stuck-up Mennonite. And then later I learned that she was not Mennonite at all. and not at all stuck up, if you know her by any means. So we are the parents of two children. Josiah is 17 years old, finishing up his 11th grade year, and our daughter Mira is 15 years old, finishing up her 9th grade year.
And Bob, I found it interesting a couple days ago when they were doing trivia about the people who were being honored for their 5th year, 10th year, 15th year, 20th year, that almost everyone missed the question about who did not play football. Everybody thought you must have played football, but you were the one person in that group of 4 that they identified who had not played football. So did you participate in other activities as a youth and college student?
Yeah, so just to let people know, we were playing this game as on Kahoot, and so everybody chimes in with the answers. And I, for a second, thought I got the question wrong, even though I knew that it was that I never played football. But then I thought maybe it was a trick question because I played soccer, which internationally is known as football. So then I thought maybe I'm going to get it wrong, but I didn't. No, I grew up on a dairy farm, and so I was farming up until about my 10th grade year, middle of my 10th grade year. One of the happiest days of my life was to see the dairy cows get loaded up on a truck and go out the lane. So I then was able to play high school soccer my junior and senior year, but I was heavily involved in band and chorus and some other things too.
Awesome. Can you tell us a story about a time when you experienced God in a powerful way?
Yeah, I'll share one. I actually have a number of them, and so I could go on for a little while. But the one that connects to AMBS in particular is that I came to AMBS in early September of 1998, and the months leading up to that was a time of pain and devastation. Southwestern Pennsylvania, which never has tornadoes because we're in the mountains and the hills there, we had tornadoes. We had several waves of tornadoes within a 2-day period. And our family farm was destroyed. Much of it was destroyed at that point. I also lost a couple of family members due to kind of secondary results of the tornado. I said goodbye to pastoring a church, that people that I deeply loved, and there was other things going on. And so by the time that I came to AMBS in 1998, I was a worn out, broken young man, tired. And I had just gone through my own shock of the previous number of months. What I liked about being at AMBS was that nobody knew my story, and I didn't have to say anything to anybody until I was ready to be able to share kind of on my own terms. And I needed that, and I really liked that. I remember walking around the campus grounds, particularly in the courtyard, and just feeling this sense. But in that time, I would say that those 3 months, my first semester, was a time of deep healing. I had started meeting with the spiritual director, and it was the first time in my life where I met with the spiritual director over a prolonged time, and she was a godsend. I had in that moment with God, that semester, some moments with God where almost supernatural. I don't want to call it supernatural, but they were God moments where I had these picture images come to my mind that in the end very much described where I was at that time of life. And I remember one of the first times I met with my spiritual director was June Mears-Driedger. And I kind of just said this, and I was fairly dismissive of this as like, that's not a God thing. That's just probably something else. And June, she stepped in and really encouraged me to embrace it as a gift from God. And I remember her saying, like, why wouldn't God give this to you? I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't happen to people. That was but she allowed me to really embrace that gift. And so I had a series of 3 of those kinds of special moments over several months. It was kind of monthly. And it was once I named it to June and affirmed that's kind of my state. Then within the next month, I had another one come, and then I would talk with June about it. And then another one would come and talk with June. And so that was very, very vivid. And I am forever grateful of those moments with God here at AMBS. Again, there's other moments that I can think of as a student, but before being here and elsewhere too, where I had very particular God moments. But that's one of them.
Thank you. I always ask people what attracted them to be part of the AMBS community. Since you've been talking about being a student, do you mind sharing what attracted you to be a student when you came, and then what attracted you to come back?
Oh yeah, I did come back. So I never planned on being a student at AMBS. I was pastoring a church. At that stage in my life, I was in my early 20s, and I was pretty much thinking that the world was much better than anything that Mennonites could do or produce. And so even though I was in a Mennonite church in a Mennonite setting at Lauraville Mennonite Church Center, I was very much thinking I wanted to do something better, and I was just thinking beyond Mennonite. So I had looked at least 24 different seminaries and then had visited some others. I, at the time, was working part-time at Lauraville Mennonite Church Center, which is now Lauraville Retreat Center. And I was there part-time while I was pastoring part-time. And we, as a camp staff, always took an annual retreat. And the Mennonite camps kind of had an arrangement with each other that we could all retreat at each other's places. And so we happened to be at Amigos Center, which is in southern Michigan, about an hour away from AMBS. And another camp staffer who grew up in Goshen, she just said, "Hey, Bob, we're going to be in the area. I'd like to drive to Goshen to see my parents, and I'd be happy to drop you off at AMBS, this seminary that's there." And so I kind of figured, well, I better do the Mennonite thing and go check out this Mennonite seminary, even though I have no intentions of going there at all. But I came here and I was on campus for 3 to 4 hours. Andrew Kreider was the admissions counselor at the time, and he just was wonderful at how he listened to me, and just a number of things. So I spent time on campus talking to different people and looking at campus housing and things. And it shocked me that I remember being in the parking lot when my friend picked me up, and I felt this deep sense of peace that this is where I'm coming. Like all the things I was looking for was going to be here. And that blew me away. And I didn't understand that. Then I certainly made the decision in January. So like 9-10 months before I actually came is where I felt that deep sense of peace. I then resigned as pastor to say I'm going to move on. And from then a whole bunch of other painful things in life happened, but I could keep coming and clinging back to this deep peace that I felt. And that carried me through. Carried me through a number of things when my mind was swirling, particularly in the months leading up to actually moving here. So that's a bit of my story of here. Again, I had said that when I got here, I studied evangelism and mission, and that's again coming out of my church planning background. But the questions that I was really grappling with in life, I found, interestingly enough, that I found my answers were being found in the Bible. So my Bible classes were providing those things that I was really gravitating towards and exploring and questioning. And so then I switched my concentration to Bible, and I ended up with, I think it was 25 of my 90 hours was in original languages of Greek and Hebrew. And I went through all the tracks and did some other independent studies within Greek and did a couple of different exegetical classes in Greek alone, and just found a love there and love in the Bible. So that definitely continued me on. Yeah, I did come back 5 years ago. I wasn't thinking about that. What made me come back is that what AMBS did for me, what it does for many of us as alums, and the church in particular, has solidified in me a number of years ago. And the various ministry settings that I've been in since I was a student, it was always about leadership in some way, or leadership development, or pastoring leaders and those kinds of things. So the mission of AMBS is just powerful. And so that made me definitely feel like at home coming back in a very different role than I ever thought I'd be in. But that would be one part of it. Yeah.
So glad that you did. So tell us about what you do as director of development. What are all of the different aspects of that role? And yeah, you can include the parts you like and the parts you wish you didn't have to do too. And you don't even have to tell us which one's which, but just tell us what you do in your role.
Yeah. Well, the other day when we employees were being honored for the different years, David Bushert, who's my direct supervisor, is the one who said words about me. And one of the things that he said that I thought, well, I guess that's true. he said something to the effect that Bob loves to come to work every day, and he doesn't know very many people who just absolutely love to come. And I thought that, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that is true to my experience in the work that I do. And in some ways, the work that I do now, I've told people that it really connects and reconnects to my evangelist identity, because I get to tell not just the story, the good news of Jesus, but the good news of AMBS. And there's a lot of good news that's going on. And I get to do that. I also get to listen to a lot of people too. But overall, I see my role as helping strengthen the relationships between AMBS and our constituency. Alums, pastors, conference leaders, donors, people in the pew who care about the church. It's really about strengthening relationships, and that I absolutely love to do. Yeah, I oversee fundraising efforts. This is not the kind of thing that I ever thought I would do. So when I came to AMBS, I had to hone in on those skills and knowledge, really, knowledge base, which is why I've taken a number of classes at the IU School of Philanthropy. But I was also ready to learn more about something new and different, and that did that. So yeah, I've learned some of the technical aspects, definitely of fundraising and those kinds of things, which I like. Part of my role is get to supervise 4 wonderful people, including you, at least a part of your hat or one of your hats, Janeen, and others too. And it's just a wonderful team of colleagues, and most of us are all alums of AMBS and ordained pastors. And so we all care about this place. So it makes it very easy to work with people like that. I really do love my job. And I've told people that at one time in life, if I could identify the top 5 jobs that I would never do in life, working in development was number 1. I had this despising thing about money and just whatever else. I didn't understand development people. I kind of thought of them as used car salespeople, and just never had any desire to do it. But then when I was at Goshen College working, informally over lunches, I would talk to people in the development department there, and just informally said, "You like your job?" "Yeah, love it." Then I thought, okay, 1, you're crazy, but tell me why you like it. And so I got to hear more and more of their stories of what they liked, to the point that I thought, well, that doesn't sound all that bad. There's some appealing parts, so that if I was ever going to transition to another thing, that maybe development, if it was the right thing, could be on the table of possibilities of things. And so the timing was just such that there was an opening here at AMBS, and long story short, kind of applied, walked through the door. And my attitude at that point, even though I was still very green about fundraising aspects, I thought, worst case scenario is I don't like it and I leave after a year. I've had good long tenures at other places, but best case scenario is I discover I really love this stuff and love working at AMBS in this way. And that's the scenario that is true for me today. So I can't really say things that I don't like. I mean, I'm sure there are, but those are not predominant in my mind at all. There's always ways of working around, but I truly am having the time of my life right now, my vocational life. And I would also say that I have my vocational identity is that of a pastor. That's what I have been. That's what I continue to be. My experience happened to be that I've pastored in places, not just in the congregation. And I very much see my role as fitting with this pastoral identity. And a person that I credit being able to do that is Jake Elias, who was a professor here of Bible at AMBS. And he was one of the first people I ever heard describe about their pastoral identity and it not be in the congregation. And I remember sitting there listening and going, that's interesting, because before I came to AMBS, I pastored in a church and I was working at Lauraville Camp. And I always had interest in ministry stuff outside of just the congregation, but dovetailing and working together. And Jake was the first person that I really heard describe his own pastoral journey. And at this stage of life for him, he did that by being a professor at AMBS. And that really captured me. So that later, when opportunities came up to teach at Goshen College or otherwise, I've often said or felt like, these things still fit within my pastoral identity. And that's very true for this role here at AMBS.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I'm going to push into this a little bit more and ask you to say, like, if somebody didn't know at all what a director of development did, what are some of the things you might do during a day? Like, describe what that practically looks like.
Well, I drink coffee from places like the Electric Brew. So my day this morning involved, after I dropped my two children off at school, then I went to this coffee shop and I had a meeting with the church leader, and we had a good conversation, standing in line to get a refill of coffee, and I bump into one of our donors and we have a little chat, and then I come to AMBS. I do a lot of thanking. Really, I do. I get to thank a lot of people who believe and support in our mission and ministry. I get to do that by having conversations with them, thanking them in person, thank you cards. I love these conversations, and I really love listening. That's what I get to do a lot. Is yes, I get to tell about AMBS, but I'm always listening to people, hearing their stories, hearing their passions and reasons why they support a place like AMBS. And then I get to share more about the passions and drives of AMBS. And sometimes those really line up well. And that might encourage somebody to increase their capacity or use their capacity to really support the mission and ministry of it. Part of my job involves lots of looking over and analyzing reports and data and all kind of things, which I love. That's kind of my nerdy self of things, and I love that part. So it's a wonderful combination of I'm not an introvert or extrovert. I'm kind of in the middle, but more on the introverted side. So my extroverted side is loving it when I'm meeting with people, attending Mennonite conferences, connecting with people, sharing about AMBS, hearing about their struggles and joys and passions. And then my nerdy introverted self gets to go analyze data and withdraw from people and do those kinds of things too. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Janeen, but that's a little bit more of what I do.
Yeah, that's great. And like, how many stamps do you use every month?
Oh my gosh, hundreds. It's usually going to be 250, 300. I'm sending birthday cards to people, thank you cards, some other cards. In a given year, our department reaches out to lots of people through cards and letters, and as well as, I'll have meetings with several hundred people each year, and I really love that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what's a dream that you have for AMBS?
Yeah. I love our name change. I remember being an alum, not here at AMBS, but elsewhere, when I heard that AMBS was maybe going to change its name. And, as a good alum, I'm like, you can't change AMBS. So I'm glad that it's Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary. And the reason I bring that up is because I really do love the Anabaptist identity that goes along with who we are as Mennonites too, and a little bit broader. So a dream for me at AMBS is that we continue to be a place where a wide spectrum of Anabaptists can come together to learn and support each other. Outside of the two denominations that only own us or that own us, but other Anabaptist groups. And that's certainly happening in the global aspect of things, where we have our collaborative agreement with Mennonite World Conference, which helps us then get in touch with other Mennonite bodies around the globe. And that is truly a wonderful blessing, and a wonderful opportunity of learning from one another and all kinds of things. My prayer and hope is that can happen in the United States and Canada in particular, particularly in this time it's a tough time right now. And I would say in the Anabaptist movement in North America in particular, there's a lot of fragmenting going on, a lot of painful stuff, I would say. I hope that we can be a place where a wide spectrum of Anabaptist groups can come together to learn about Jesus, learn about the Bible, learn about each other, just all of that. So that's my dream, is that we can be this hub of a wide spectrum of Anabaptist groups to all help us further what is it that God is calling us to do in our particular settings. And I hope AMBS can be that for people.
Yeah, my observation is you attend a lot of church conferences, and you have a really great sense of kind of what's going on in different places in the Mennonite world. And you often come back with a grieving heart, and you carry with you those stories of pain, of places where people are trying to struggle through different understandings, whether they stay part of this group or not. And you bring that back to this place and help us all to see what our role might be in that bigger picture. So I'm grateful for that. But that does something to you too. I know you studied lament in your doctoral program. Do you find yourself coming back to that work when you have these interactions with people who are going through painful experiences in the church?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, so when I'm out on the road, I'm with people, but I also have a lot of alone time because I'm driving around or whatever. And yeah, I do find myself coming back to lament as how I understand lament and recognizing it. And yeah, that's part of my own spiritual process. I also draw on, I would call, quote, skills of pastoral care and self-preservation in that regard, because listening to stories, not just conferences, but to people, you have to be careful not to take it on yourself. You want to be that listening presence and being in that holy moment. But so there's a lot of that kind of exercising of things that I learned here at AMBS and just along the way to work at that, but certainly lament. Actually, I just preached at our church. I'm a member of College Mennonite Church in Goshen, where my spouse, where Pamela is pastoring. And I happened to preach this past Sunday, and I preached on Colossians and on Apostle Paul. And I said in this sermon, as part of this context, that I attended 8 Mennonite conferences last year, and I dreaded going to every one of them because, in part, the loss that I felt that I was going to experience there, as well as the fear of the divisive rhetoric that may or may not happen at each of those places. However, I also said that after each of those 8 conferences, I actually came away feeling very exhilarated and rejuvenated and uplifted, because these conferences in those settings, in each and every setting, they're gathered worship, they're gathered being together, and their genuine sense of really struggling with how to live out the good news of Jesus in their particular settings and contexts and all of that. So I surprisingly came away uplifted after each of those conferences. That doesn't make light of the painful realities that are going on, but that's just a bit of Bob's experience, going with dread and coming back. And then by the end, it was kind of like in my own prayers with God, it'd be like, okay, Bob, oh ye of little faith, you should. So you would think after the 3rd or 4th time, I wouldn't dread, but I kept dreading, and the cycle kept being the same. Dread, joy, dread. I don't know what this year will bring, but that was last year.
Thanks. What are 1 or 2 questions you have for alumni, especially those who've joined us today?
Well, I have 2 questions, and one is not appropriate for them to respond to right now, except in person, is like, and this is my development hat. We rely on people in the pew to be supportive of our ministries, and we rely on our alumni to help us connect with who are those people that can help spur on, who would have resonance with what we do at AMBS, and who would want to use their financial capacity to help support. So if you have names of people, let me know, but not through the chat. That's all confidential information. The other thing is, and it kind of relates to the dream question you had asked me. This is part of Bob's dream. It may not be everybody's dream, of being a place of a wide spectrum of Anabaptist groups, particularly given the realities within the US and Canada to some degree too, of how we have been in the last 10 years. How does AMBS do that? How do we be that? A place where there is a wide spectrum of Anabaptists. That would be something I wouldn't mind having some reflections on. And if people disagree with that kind of a dream for AMBS, that's fair to say as well. Again, we all have different thoughts. That's just where I'm at.
Thank you. So, alumni, you are invited to share your responses to that. You can either put those in the chat or in the Q&A. And it's time now for your questions. What would you like to ask Bob? Any questions that you have, please put in the Q&A and I'll get those to him. Bob, while we're waiting for their questions, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about the role of alumni as partners in the development work of the seminary. What are some of the ways you have seen that happen? I mean, clearly there are many alumni who give themselves. What are some other things that you have experienced as alumni partnering with us?
Yeah, maybe it relates to your question, Janeen, when you asked, well, why did I come back? Why did I come back in this role? And that's because I reflected on my time at AMBS as a student. And so 20 some years later, I know what that foundational time did for me. I know the ways that it strengthened me and the ways that it didn't. One of the reasons that I came to AMBS as a student in the first place was I was pastoring in a congregation half-time and working in a Mennonite camp half-time. And I remember, and I was single at that time, so I was pretty mobile. So I was looking at a variety of options. Do I stay half-time at one of the two places and do half-time seminary at some other place? At the time, I was part of Allegheny Mennonite Conference, and we would have monthly pastor peer gatherings. And I got to sit around the table with 20-some pastors every month, and I got to hear their stories. And some of their stories involved a 20-year-long journey of seminary education, and others were more 3 years in and out. And I was trying to figure out, and I decided that 20-year route was not what I wanted to do. And I was mobile, and I came up and then went to seminary. Now, I come from a tradition where seminary education was not at all the norm. And it didn't happen. I grew up in the conservative Mennonite conference. We were mostly bivocational pastors. There was no paid pastors. So why did Bob think he needed to go to seminary in the first place? Well, when I was pastoring, and this is kind of how I described it to people, that I came to a point where it felt like I was banging my head up against a wall at different times because I didn't know what to do with certain things or certain scenarios that presented themselves. I didn't feel like that I was equipped. That's why I went, one of the reasons why I looked at seminary. So being a student, now an alum, number of years of decade experience, I could test out what were those things that I learned at AMBS that were helpful for me or that provided the tools. And that's my alum experience. So I now have some thoughts about what I would like AMBS to do or not do. So I think that's something we all as alum have. We all have our experiences since the time. And so I really value, and I know you do too, Janeen, we value hearing our alums. Yes, we appreciate the financial gifts, but what are the experiences? How should AMBS be equipping people? I didn't come to AMBS expecting to become director of development at a place, but yet I can say AMBS prepared me in some ways for this. And so as alum, we all find ourselves in different places. Some of us have done congregational ministry. We've done a wide array. So I would constantly be open to hearing from people. How did AMBS equip you? And what are ways that AMBS could better equip people, given your experiences that you've had, again, in ways that fit with our mission? Now, if you're an alum who happened to go into, I don't know, I'm not even going to pick a vocation, but, it has nothing to do with anything that we do. Well, we're not going to change to accommodate that necessarily. But if it gave you a framework for that, that's different. So value hearing their experiences and their advice and their counsel.
Thank you. We have a question from Naum Serato who asks, who's someone in your profession that you really admire, or who are your role models? And then a second question after that is, what strategies have had the biggest impact on your success? And I'm assuming he's asking about your success in development work. Thank you, Naum.
Hi, Naum. Oh, in my profession that I admire, role models. There's a number of people that come to mind. So again, a number of the people at Goshen College in the development department there who are my colleagues, them sharing their stories was very helpful and wonderful. So I think of some of them, but there are two other people that come to my mind. One is a particular donor, a person with a lot of capacity and has been very generous with so many different places. And I met with this person the first time, and I was about 4 or 5 months into this role, maybe 3 months in, and I remember a couple of things that this person said to me. One was right at the end, this person said, Bob, what's hard for me at times is that a lot of times people come and ask me for money, and that's all that they do, particularly organizations. And, he let me know he's more than just being an ATM machine type of thing. He has true passion and care for organizations that they support. But what he also told me was he loves philanthropy. And he said, if I had a second life, I would come back as a development officer. I'm like, what? and this person has done that in their capacity and role by serving on boards and a number of things. And again, I'm thinking, okay, you're a little crazy. Tell me more about that. So I've maintained a relationship with this individual. And I come back to this individual as kind of a mentoring person for me within fundraising work itself. I've appreciated this individual a lot to give me some perspectives, and he's given me some good counsel and wisdom on some things that I've then gone and done. So that's one person that I hold up who comes at it from the other end, but also in this same end. The second person, and I don't want to get too high and fluty spiritual here, but the Apostle Paul is that for me on a number of fronts. But I appreciated and loved Apostle Paul in terms of his pastoral work with a wide array of kinds of congregations and trying to work with them and their different realities and the different kind of relationships he had. Coming into this development role, I've actually keyed into a number of places where he has worked at fundraising and how that very much was embedded within his ministry. And so I've come to appreciate that. So I like Paul, not just as fundraiser, but in some other ways too. So those would be two places. Strategies about biggest impact on success. One is a lot of, I'm not ready to say that we've had big impact or big success. I'll let others decide that. But for me, it's really truly listening to people, listening to their hearts, listening to their passions, and collaborating with people here at AMBS and collaborating with donors and people in the church and how we work together. Those are just very key things. So listening, collaborating, and then implementing and following up and following through and testing out ideas and continue to push ideas and always be listening to the Spirit as well. For me, kind of those Spirit prompts. But yeah.
Another question I will follow up with this on, what percentage now of the AMBS budget is covered through tuition dollars? And what is the amount that your team is responsible for raising each year?
Yeah. So I remember being at Goshen College, and our CFO there would talk about tuition as part of the budget, and that was kind of typical for a lot of higher ed, undergraduate higher ed, and it was like 2/3 is tuition dollars, and then another third was other things. Yeah, here at AMBS, it's roughly like 7 or 8% right now of tuition dollars covers our operational budget. And seminary is just a different world in that regard. So we are set through our leadership education fund, which is our annual fund. We roughly raise money that supports about 40%, 45% in that range of operational budget on a given year. And part of our work is securing funds or raising funds for the immediate, but we also need funds for like our endowment and those kinds of things. So when you consider our current endowments, and that's the work of previous development folks and previous church leaders before we ever arrived on the scene here, then you're talking another 35, 40%, give or take, there too. So between the money that we raise for Leadership Education Fund, kind of our annual fund, and the endowment earnings that are supporting AMBS, there you're looking about 80% combined there, or a little bit more than 80%. And then you have some tuition, and then there's some other revenues that come in. So AMBS require, we very much appreciate our constituency, those that have gone before us and those current and those coming up, for us to live out our ministry.
And Naun is following up with this. How can alumni help? Are donations the only channel to maintain the scholarships that we offer to students?
Donations are not the only way to help. And I would say at a place like AMBS alums compared to another state university alums, we aren't, preparing people to become doctors and lawyers and other higher paying profession jobs. So if I was an alumni director in that kind of setting, it's very different, Janeen, than you being alumni director here or us raising funds. That doesn't mean we need and appreciate financial contributions from alumni, definitely. But there are other ways that you can be helpful. One is to always be in conversation with us if there are people that or ideas of programming you have. So even sometimes when you share ideas with us, we might have some things in the works that dovetail nicely with what your idea is. And so that can sometimes prompt us along the way as well. So I'm sharing your ideas, sharing names of people who you think might have synergy or resonance with our mission and ministry. Those would be two ways.
Thanks. Paul Lichty has shared a question as well. He has often worked in settings where he has found some suspicion about AMBS and other Mennonite institutions. And in the current environment, how much are you interacting with those who have chosen to withdraw from Mennonite Church USA? And when you do that, how do you approach that work? Great question. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Paul. I'm just rereading your question here. How much do I interact? I do consciously interact with people who have what you just described as constantly withdraw from Mennonite Church USA. My meeting this morning with the church leader was one of those kind of people that you just described. So I do. How do I approach it? I came on the scene at AMBS a little over 5 years ago, and it was particularly within Mennonite Church USA. And I'm not going to speak to our Mennonite Church Canada hat of ourselves. But in Mennonite Church USA at that point, it was very much one of those very painful moments. And I would call it like a really bad sunburn. And so I knew that when I was talking with people who either consciously left or consciously not at all happy and maybe thinking about leaving, and I would say we're in one of those times again, I knew that in that moment, when it came to AMBS, I could either help further the divide or the pain or, slap that sunburn that really hurts, or just kind of take a posture of listen and learn. Because we're all not perfect by any means, and we're all on our own journeys of faith and maturation and all of that. So I took a posture of listening. Part of my hope then was, hey, maybe once the sunburn subsides at some point in life, maybe at some point we'll be able to have certain conversations where we're working together again. I don't know. I asked this person this morning when I was meeting with, I'm like, that's kind of Bob's dream, and it might be a pipe dream. I may never see it realized. I don't know. But that's a bit of my posture right now, and continues to be. And again, we are also in those moments right now where people I've definitely had relationships within MCUSA for the past 5 years are definitely deciding whether they're going to continue in that relationship or not. So it even means more to me now than 5 years ago when I was just coming onto the scene. But that's still my posture, listening and learning.
And in the midst of that, how do you practice self-care is a question that Ruben Chupp has asked. Thank you, Ruben.
Hey, Ruben. Again, some of that goes back to lament. I've relied more on lament than I ever imagined when I was studying it in my doctoral work 15 plus years ago. The work that I did was the role of biblical lament in the faith formation and pastoral care of adolescents. But that work has guided me not just as working in the church, but has guided me as a parent. It's guided me in my own life, in my own dark moments of life, or those painful moments of life when things were going around. Knowing the framework of that gave me some insurance, and it gave me a way to communicate to God and to put it out. It doesn't necessarily make me feel any better, and that's okay. Faith isn't just about feelings. And in the same way, this is one of those things. The other thing is that I really want to listen, and I pay attention to the times of joy and where the times where the Spirit is working, where God is at work. And that very much for me, those 8 conferences I attended last year, I could hear and observe and see as an outsider how they were paying attention to God at work in their lives in the midst of whatever was going on. And that truly was encouraging. So the other discipline of kind of thankfulness and listening to what's God up to, whether I agree or disagree, but I could see how God was up to something in those places, and those people were responding to what God was up to, or trying to respond to what God was up to. That's another discipline of just paying attention to those. How's the Holy Spirit at work?
I'll give time for one more question from the alumni who are here. And while they're
Richard has a question there, Janeen.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh, no, he's just saying hi. Hi, Rich. Well, hi, Richard. I want to say hi to you.
Richard was saying he had to get leave the webinar. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We have one more question here. Rebecca Kaufman is asking, is there some kind of mechanism within the system here at AMBS that you can report back to other administrators and professors what you are hearing? That's a great question, Rebecca. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Yes, we have a mechanism that continues to get fine-tuned. So, as Janeen earlier said, when I, and not just me, but our whole team, when we're out running around to different conferences, how do we bring back what we are learning and hearing and observing, and all kinds of things? So what we've started doing X number of months ago, I have an Excel spreadsheet that lines up all the conferences in US and Canada, and when they're meeting, and not just MCUSA conferences, but some others too. And then saying, okay, who from AMBS is going, who from within the development team or others that are going. And then when we go, I've now started to have people write a small summary of what they are hearing, observing, key leaders in that conference. It all then goes into this spreadsheet. So I sit on administrative cabinet here. And so every so often I remind people about that spreadsheet, and that's a way that it informs other departments. So whether it's, admissions potentials for people, or church leadership center offerings, or potential resource, those kinds of things, that's one bottom line mechanism that comes back that we try and share in a short way. And then we can obviously have further conversation depending on the department head, if they want to follow up a bit more. So that's a mechanism. It's being fine-tuned.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. And thanks to all of the alumni who've joined us today, and those who will listen to this later as well. Remember to be in touch with me or others on our team if you have any questions that you'd like to have us answer. If you are interested in taking a class or being part of a church leadership center event or group, I know that they're working at finding people to be part of the one of the small groups for experienced pastors. This spring has a few spaces left. Remember to keep encouraging people to consider seminary studies. Our alumni are so important to us as shoulder tappers. So hope you continue to do that. We will take this summer as a break, and in September we'll gather again for Third Thursdays. Next year, we hope to do a mix of individual interviews along with interviews about some of the things that are happening here at AMBS that are new, so it won't all be focused on individual stories. Thank you so much for being part of this today, and thanks to student Janet McGeary for running the AV. And we hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful summer. Bye.